freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me.
The struggle for freedom and an inclusive community has no beginning and no end. It is fought on many fronts, in many ways, and has many heroes, the names of most of whom we will never know. But there are some particular moments and individuals who serve to quicken the spirit of a movement, who heighten its urgency, who make it difficult to pretend that nothing is wrong. There are moments when a few individuals open the floodgates of change with their courage.
I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Well, let me tell you, there's no more wailing, no more wailing.
We were the igniters.
I've known all of these guys practically my entire life.
We went in and, we sat down and we were told to leave.
We always came back to the rock wall.
And be free.
Our clubhouse was located at the end of McDade and Cotton Street, which is known as the rock wall. That's where we met every weekend to discuss political climates and other things that probably we can't discuss here.
Because we didn't want them to know what we were doing, we were up to, see. We were like other teenagers. We were developing and we had a little rich blood in us. And Harold Foster was the kind of leader. He was like a hot spark plug.
We were troublemakers. We questioned authority and challenged it head on.
On February 1st, 1960, 4 North Carolina A&T University students sat in at the Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro and launched a national movement of direct action protests.
Shortly after the sit-ins in Greensboro, several of us in high school were talking about what we should do or what we could do in order to bring about desegregation in Chapel Hill. And we had the people from the Chapel Hill Weekly to come and interview us. And at that particular time, we were letting them know that eventually we would be doing something comparable to what was done in Greensboro.
You may have front page news for Monday, should trespassing warrants be served. I think the Negroes prepared to pay the price.
The demonstration from the students, it was big news. We got a wind of that and wanted to do something. And this is when we rallied, Harold Foster being the leader, and the next hit was the Colonial Drug Store.
On Sunday, February 28, 1960, 9 young men who were students at the Lincoln High School entered what was then the Colonial Drug Store on Franklin Street. They sat at a booth and simply sought the same service that was given to white customers. They remained seated even after they were denied service and told to leave.
So that Sunday, we decided we were going to pay Big John a visit.
I think the reason we chose Colonial Drug Store was because everybody was familiar with Colonial Drug Store. Coming out of the black section, it was the first store other than on that side of the street that, we would go in. So it was easily accessible. We went in and, we sat down and we were told to leave.
We all walked in at approximately the same time. I went over to the booth, as I recall, had a seat. Big John came over and said, "Jimmy, you can't sit here." And I just looked at him and didn't move.
Big John approached me and said, "Mason, I can't believe you're here." Okay. And like I say, he He knew us all. He knew us by name.
He went to ask some of the other guys to not sit down. They didn't move. He then proceeded to call the law.
In time, they left voluntarily and were confronted by police who took down their names as they stood on the sidewalk outside the drugstore.
His name was David Caldwell. David Caldwell was probably a black cop that did what he was told to do. So consequently, we didn't respect him, but he had our names. We weren't arrested that day, but later on, warrants were sworn out for our arrest for trespassing.
David Caldwell was the so-called arresting officer. He came and he took our names. And he told us at that time, if John decided to press charges, that we would be arrested. And subsequently, we were arrested several months later.
Man, this town is hard to crack. It's called a liberal place, but that's a mirage, man. When you go to get water, you just get a mouthful of sand.
After we participated in the very first movement, several of them broke out.
We were the igniters, and we wanted to do something that encouraged others in the community, especially the younger people, and got the attention of, our parents and the community.
In his memoir of the Civil Rights Movement in Chapel Hill, John Ely wrote, "The high school students from the Negro community revolted first." Professor Marcellus Barksdale observed, the Civil Rights Movement in Chapel Hill was one of sustained intensity from February 1960 through the spring of 1964. Hardly a week passed during that time that there was no development. The floodgates had been opened.
As historian and activist John K. Chapman wrote, what Chapel Hill had that many other small communities did not have was a leadership corps ready to take the dare. Without movement experience, formal organization, or the assurance of widespread support, these young black men set the struggle in motion.
The question became, how far can you? How much of a troublemaker can some little black boys be before they go to jail? The challenge was ours. I think we're still asking that question in various forms.